So we were talking about the fact that the type of nullification of will called bitul yesh, the nullification of being, that was the purpose of the creation of this world, of this reality that we see, meaning that the purpose of a human being is to come to a state where he's willing to forego his will in order to do Hashem's will.
Right.
Except that in the past, there were empires, there were emperors who decided what your will was. Everybody was like a slave in the empire. The Torah wants you, first of all, to be free, so that you can do this with Hashem. Do this with God. You're not serving a man. Okay? So it says there's no example of this in the physical world. We can't find an example of something else that acts this way. That it has one will and it forgoes it for something else.
Okay.
So the closest thing
of the animals.
So the closest thing is domesticated animals.
But you said that they mabater their will.
Okay.
They didn't have any will to start off
with.
Yeah,
they did. Of course they did. They'd rather sit around, like if it's a cow or in this case a sheep, it would rather sit around and grow its wool. But then, when you take it,
that's what they want to do. Maybe
because that's what they do. When you leave them alone, that's what they do.
Maybe they're too stupid to go and find something else to do.
Said it, but that's what they do. That's what they want to do. Okay. They do it like all animals. They do what they want to do. And then you come and you shear the wool. You shear the sheep. And while you're shearing it, it completely they completely nullify themselves. It's like they freeze. It's an amazing thing. Have you ever seen wool shearing?
Yeah, they found a sheep that's been wandering around in the desert of Australia for about 5 years, and it weighed about 200 kilos. And then they sheared it, and it weighed about 10 kilos. So they had to put blankets on it to keep it warm.
Yeah. So
it's not just what is the wool supposed to be for on a sheep? It's supposed to be with humans, or it has something to do with them?
Something to do with them, I guess. Otherwise, it wouldn't be growing it without end. Yes, some reason. In any case, so he says the sheep is, of all the domesticated animals, the sheep is the best example of someone who nullifies his will for somebody else. It says when the sheep is created as a sheep in our world, it's called a kevis. Kaf bet sin. הבית קודם לשין, כי הבית רומז לבחינת חוכמה, וחוכמה היא בני בית. והשין רומז לג' קווין המסתעפין נמשכים למטה. So he says the order in the word, the way that we know it, kevis, is that the bet comes before the shin, and the bet is chokhmah, and the shin is the midos. Okay?
So you're telling me that Hashem wants 3 million sheep instead of human beings who just don't think about anything, don't do anything, and they're like morons whose brains have been programmed and they just do whatever they're told.
Said you have to be free first. You're not becoming a moron. Why are you becoming a moron?
If you have no will, you have no will, you just do
no, you have a will, but you nullify it to Hashem's will. That doesn't mean you're stupid then. Why would that make you stupid?
Because you don't have any freedom of choice anymore. You only do.
What does brains have to do with freedom of choice? Somebody like, I don't know, what's his name? Natan Sharansky. So he's stuck in the Russian gulag or wherever he is. Mm-hmm. He didn't become stupid because of it. Just because you take away somebody's will, you don't take away their brain. All the more so that the will that Hashem wants from you, the biggest mitzvah that He has is to develop your brain. So why would that make you into a moron? It doesn't make you into a moron. It makes you a very smart person.
Sheep are morons.
In terms of your will, it makes you into a sheep, yes. In terms of curbing your cravings, in terms of being able to control yourself and so on, you become in a certain sense very, very soft, like a sheep. That's true. But that's a good part. That's the benefit of it. Most people would say that's a benefit. It's not a good thing that a person is slave to his cravings, to his will that is uncontrolled. Every person has to control his will. And even if you're not even if you're just doing it because of social, like we said, this always existed. Society always forced people to conform in some way. And you could say, yes, he created an army of idiots and imbeciles and morons. It's true. When you're serving society, maybe you are an idiot, an imbecile, and a moron. When you're serving Hashem, you're free. You're actually free to develop who you are. That's the idea. So he says, the way that the sheep is, in our world, we call it a kevis. So there, the wisdom comes before the emotions. And that's how it is in this world. But when they were in their root, in their source, so there the word is not kevis, sham nikra kesev, where the shin comes before the bet, meaning, shashinu midot elenot shelemala machokma v'sechel, nikav zor tured dechashucha. So he says there, above, we said that the root of the sheep is very high. So what does it mean there? That the emotions come before the intellect. What kind of emotions? What do we mean? It's like what David HaMelech said, Bahamot ha'iti imach v'ani tamid imach. That I'm like a domesticated animal with you, and I'm always with you. To be like a domesticated animal, there's an idea that the emotions have to come before the intellect. What do I mean by the emotions come before the intellect? That it's not emotions in the, expressive sense. He's not expressing his emotions. Rather, it's emotions in the sense of the emotions that where...
Desires.
What?
Desires. Physical desires.
It's certainly not physical desires. It's far beyond that. It's what we call the emotion of being one with Hashem. It's an emotional state, not an intellectual state. Okay? You can't reach it through intellect. By intellect, there's always a big separation. But by the higher emotions, there is an actual, it's called, we talked about it, it's called Reuta de Liba, the will of the heart. V'aksavim ifrid Yaakov. But Yaakov, he separated the ksavim. Okay? He took the ksavim, and he, which is how it said in Vayetze, when he takes Lavan's sheep. So it doesn't say kvasim, it says ksavim, meaning that he went to the source of the sheep. The kesev, not the kevis. Okay?
It's printed, it's written differently.
In Vayetze. It says v'aksavim yifrid Yaakov. So the usual explanation when you would ask somebody who knows Tanakh, why the two words, kesev and kevis. So there's a name for it when with the tongue it goes both directions. You say kevis, kesef. But that's not the explanation in Pnimius. The explanation in Pnimius is that the kesef represents something higher, and it represents the source of the kevis, the spiritual source. There's not many examples like this. Okay? One might say that by Adam, the word me'od is like the higher form, like havesh v'aluach me'od me'od, or levacha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. So it's like the higher man in you, the higher individual in you. So anyway, יעקב הוא הממשיך בחינת הכסבים מבחינתם ודרכתם שמקורם לבחינת הפירוד, שיהיה נקרא בשם כבשים, כדי שנמשך בחינת הביטול גם בעלמא דפירודה. So the sheep represents some kind of, like we said, an example of somebody nullifying their will completely, and Yaakov was the first one to bring it down. This power to nullify one's will completely before God. And so that even in this world of separation, where everything is separate, there would be this possibility of dedicating, completely sacrificing one's will to the will of Hashem. So now we understand why the Korban Atamid, the perpetual daily sacrifice, was of two sheep. So the Torah says in Pinchas that you should make one offering, daily offering in the morning from a sheep, and one in the afternoon from a sheep. והעניין, כי בוקר הוא בוקר דאברהם, מבחינת חסד עליון, שמתפשט אור אין סוף ברוך הוא למעלה עד אין קץ ולמטה עד אין תכלית. So he says, why 1 in the morning? The 1 in the morning represents Avram, right? Because Avraham was the one who made the morning prayer.
Got up early in the morning.
Okay? And he got up early in the morning. In the morning, the light that comes out is like the light of the infinite. Okay? So the light of the infinite is Avram. So that's not good, because that's too divorced from this reality. והנה בהתפשטותו למטה מדרגה אחר מדרגה בירידות המדרגות בדרך השתלשלות והתלבשות יש שניקה וחיזה לקליפות והסתתרו אחת לנוח מהקדושה מבחינת עולי קדר. כמו שאמר אברהם, לו ישמעאל יחיה לפניך, וצריך להקדים כבש, שהוא בחינת ביטול, בחינת רחמנות, שלא יומשך אור אינסוף ברוך הוא, רק בבחינת ביטול, להיות אור אינסוף שורה ומתגלה במי שבטל אליו דווקא. So it says, because Abraham is the infinite light, and the infinite light doesn't differentiate between somebody who's worthy and somebody who's not, just as Avram. And he even wanted Ishmael to become his inheritor. And he said,
but he wanted Ishmael to do tshuva.
He wanted, but in the end he didn't.
No, he didn't want Ishmael to be his inheritor.
He was
Russia.
In any case, Lu Ishmael yichya lefanecha. So it means I hope that he does tshuva, but in the end, I accept him the way he is.
Okay.
And that's why we later have this medrash with Rabbi Bana, who sees Avram and Sarah in Maras HaMachpelah, in the cave of the patriarchs, and he sees them, that Sarah is taking lice out of Avram's hair. So the explanation there is that Avram, all his thoughts are pure, so he doesn't notice that he's being taken advantage of, that there is lice on his head. He doesn't see that there are parasites that come to take from him, because he gives freely to everybody. So Sarah has to be the one differentiating. So it says the same way here, when we bring the kevis, what we're saying is, the kevis in the morning, what we're saying is, Hashem, don't give the infinite light to somebody who's not batel, to somebody who's not nullified his will to you. ואת הכבש השני תעשה בין הארבעים, זמן מידתו של יצחק, בחינת גבורות להמתיקן. The second sheep, of the daily sacrifice, was given in the afternoon, the time when Yitzchak and his harsh judgments are in the air. And so the second sheep comes to sweeten the harsh judgments. Because we also said that not only is the sheep a symbol of being completely nullified to Hashem, but we said that the sheep has a sound that awakens Rahmanus, that awakens mercy, compassion.
It's like the shofar.
Okay, so that sound that the sheep makes in the afternoon, that's to sweeten the harsh judgments. It's to bring compassion down into the world, in spite of the fact that there is harsh judgment in the world. And to bring down these two examples of bittul, of nullification, you need two sheep. So Yaakov is the one who brings these two sacrifices, as it were. It comes through Yaakov. Because he's the middle axis, so he's between Avram and Yitzchak. So he mediates between them. לכך הפריד יעקב הכבשים מבחינת כסבים, שהוא במקום בשורשן, מבחינת כבשים לעלמא דפירודה, להתחלק בשתי בחינות ומדרגות שונות. That's why Yaakov brought them down. So when Yaakov brought them down, when he freed the kvasim, the ksavim, says the Alter Rebbe, it's almost the same thing as saying that he brought two karbanos, two sacrifices, one in the morning, one in the evening, one for his grandfather, Avram, and one for his father, Isaac. אך בשבועות והניף הכהן אותם על לחם על שני כבשים. But now we're coming back to the korban, to the sacrifices of Shavuos. There it says that the Kohen should wave them on top of the bread, on these two sheep.
Right.
Why? So he's saying that he's taking the sheep as they are down here, and he's lifting them, he's waving them up to reach back to their source.
It's like Aaron did with the Levim.
Okay, same idea. Anytime you wave something, it's like you're returning it to its source. V'hainu im alechem. Therefore, you do it with the 2 breads, 2 loaves of bread. כי הנה עניין תנופות שתי הלחם הוא, כי הנה שני הלחם רומזות לתורה שבכתב ותורה שבעל פה. כמו שכתוב לכו לחמו בלחמי.
How do you know the שתי לחם is תורה שבעל פה ותורה שבכתב?
Because it says, the Torah in general is called lechem. It says, go, really, it's the other meaning of lilchom, which means to fight. So the Torah requires the battle of Torah. It requires a person to engage in battle. Like Rabbi Yochanan in Reish Lakish. You need a sparring partner. You need somebody else to become sharp off of. So Torah is learned in this way, that you have to become sharp. You need to, as if you're in a war, in a certain sense. So these 2 breads that the sheep were placed upon they represent 2 Torahs. Which Torahs? The written Torah and the oral Torah. So they have to be also lifted up.
Why couldn't you just lift up the breads without the sheep?
So we'll see in a second. He's going to hopefully say. There's a difference between the Torah, the written Torah, and the oral Torah. What do you mean a difference? Of course there's a difference. No, there's no difference, because really everything that the oral Torah says is in the written Torah. So how can you say they're different? They're not really different. They're different. Why would
one's
they be
written
different?
down, one isn't. That's what
the one's written down, one's not. No, so it says there is a difference. Difference between Yana Ta'amim Shbatorah. This is something that's in the written Torah that's not in the oral Torah. The oral Torah doesn't have Ta'amim. You don't read it with a nigun.
It's very interesting you should say that, because the Alter Rebbe Dafka did read it.
He had a nigun, but there's no nigun.
He spoke with a nigun.
He spoke that way. Everything he said with a nigun. But it doesn't say in the Mishnah, there's no ta'amim. People try to reconstruct something today. It's a bunch of nonsense. They remembered because they remembered. They repeated it enough times. Okay, if you want to believe that if you want to argue that the cantillation marks, they're a mimetic element, a mimetic mechanism.
A which?
Mimetic, so that you can remember. So it's a way to remember.
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic is something else. Mimetic. Mimesis, which means memory.
Never heard that word.
I think that's how you say it.
Okay.
So if it's a mimetic mechanism that you use in order to remember, so that was only needed in the time of the Tanakh. In the time of the Mishnah, it wasn't needed anymore. Why? Because people had books. There were enough books to go around. There weren't many, but there were enough. So there was always, in every yeshiva, the main thing they had was a library. And the library was kept by a librarian. And the librarian learned everything by heart, so that he could always, and whenever anybody asked him, he could say what he knew. And if there was any question, so they went back to the book. He had a scroll in which the Mishnayos were written, in which the teachings of the oral Torah were written. So they already used writing in a certain sense. They didn't need to use cantillation marks.
Where do you get that picture from?
This is what it says, and there's a lot of rights that talk about what's he called? I don't remember his name. The librarian in every yeshiva.
Morton Mannion. Okay.
And there was a problem because it was forbidden to write the oral Torah down.
Right.
So these were kept secret. Secret, what do you mean secret? Everybody knew they existed, but nobody had access.
Highly publicized.
People didn't have access to them. The reason they didn't have access wasn't because they didn't want people to know what it was written inside. On the contrary, they wanted everybody to know what was written inside. But if we give access, then people will count on the fact that they can just come by anytime they want and read it from the book. We don't want them. We want them to know it by heart. So that's how, but that didn't last for long. And about 300 years into this whole system, Rebbe decided that no, it's not going to work this way. And from now on, these scrolls are going to become public, and everybody's going to be able to use them. And so he changed the whole structure of learning in the yeshivas. Okay. So yesh b'torah shebechtav Hashem b'torah sheba'al peh. So the Torah, the written Torah, has one element that the written Torah doesn't, and that is the cantillation marks. Zarka, makaf, shofar, olech, segolta, shem chinat nigun, which are a melody. Hold on a second. Nope, it's not what I thought.
What did you think?
Somebody coming here to do some work, and thought he was on the street not getting in. Okay. So what's special about this nigun? That it adds the sweetness and the pleasure to the learning. And that's what it says about Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, that he had 1,005 songs. And it says, until in V'layla shiroimi, his song is with me at night. Why? Because the ta'amim, these cantillation marks, are in b'bchinat shir v'nigun. They're the melody, they're the song of the Torah. Then again, b'shira v'zimra merov simcha v'ta'anug. To sing and enjoy the melody and to learn, right, all with pleasure and joy. שהטעמים אלו הם בתורה שבכתב ולא בתורה שבעל פה. And they only exist in the written Torah, they don't exist in the oral Torah. ואין בתורה שבעל פה שום פירוש וביאור על הטעמים לבאר ולפרש לנו. He says it's more than that. It's not just that they don't have. There's a second side. Oh, we need another page. It's more than that. It's not just that there are no cantillation marks on the oral Torah, but there's no explanation. That's a big deal. Where do you find in the Gemara a mention of the cantillation marks? So come the academics and they say it was invented only in the 10th century. Nonsense. It existed since Moshe Rabbeinu. There was no system for writing it down, but that's exactly how everybody remembered it, by singing the verses. Of course it existed. What you're saying is that there was no official sign, meaning they didn't bring down the symbols for this and that. And it could be that when you bring down the symbols, you lose a lot, right? It's like the difference between dance and trying to write choreography down. You lose 50% in the commitment to paper. So it could be that when they sang the Torah, it was much more elaborate than what we have. And what we have is a watered-down version to retain whatever the main things that needed to be retained. But certainly their melody was much more complex than what we have now. Okay, so we need to print another page.
By the way, I have a running machlokes with somebody who lanes from the Torah when there's no Bar Korah, and he doesn't lane it, he reads it. He says it, he doesn't sing it. And I said to him,
that's what happens.
I don't think that it's kosher if you say it.
Not kosher.
This?
It's just not nice. It's just...
It's horrible.
It's not what it was meant to be. That's what you lose when you commit something to paper. But he says, but there's nowhere in the Gemara they didn't discuss this. Where did they discuss it? In the Zohar. The Zohar has a lot of discussion on the Tamim. And the whole literature of the Zohar, the Tikkunei Zohar and so on, it's full of it. So you see that it was something that was known. This, by the way, is why we associate the concealed aspect of Torah, meaning the Zohar and the whole Zoharic literature, we associate it with the cantillation, with the singing of the Torah. So much so that nobody asks. Nobody asks anywhere in the oral Torah, what is this song? What do you mean he had 1,005 songs? What do you mean that David HaMelech says, I sing at night? What are you singing at night? And so everybody thinks he's talking about Tehillim. So what is the Torah Shebaal Peh? What's its what again? This is all to explain why you put the two kvasim, the two sheep, over the two loaves of bread. Really, the oral Torah is just to explain. We're page 29. Is just to explain the purpose of the mitzvos, okay? The meaning of the mitzvos, how they work, the commandments. Because this explanation, how the mitzvos are, the details, and so on and so forth, that's in the oral Torah and not in the written Torah. So that the oral Torah has, that's greater than the written Torah. There's a lot more elaboration. Because every single mitzvah, every single commandment that's written in the Torah needs an explanation in the oral Torah how to actually perform it, how to actually get the details.
Instructions. Okay. 1.
Right.
Open your tefillin.
ובשבועות מניפים שתי בחינות הלחם למעלה. So on Shavuos, we take these two loaves of bread, symbolizing the written Torah and the oral Torah, and we wave them up also. We return them to their source. להיות כלולות ומתאחדות באור אין סוף ברוך הוא, כי שם הן מיוחדות בתכלית היחוד, אי הוא וחיו אחד, הוא היודע והוא המדע, ובהן ועל ידם מתייחדים גם חיות הכבשים, להיותם בטלים בשורשם מקורן העליון, להיות הכל בבחינת ביטול. So we're taking both man and the Torah, and we're lifting everything up back to its source, everything so that it connects to the infinite light. Okay. And that's what we do on Shavuos. ולכן בשתי הלחם והשבועות כתיב חמץ תאפנה. And that's why the two loaves of bread on Shavuos are the only ones that are made leavened. They're made chametz. שמאחר שמתעלה למקור החיות, ומקור החיות מהווה עולמות הנפרדים משמיים, ובחינת הפנסם ממות עולם, שזהו חיותם והתעברותם. שמחמת שמתנשא מסתלק מהם אור אין סוף ברוך הוא למעלה ונאות לבש שלוחה ממש. I'm reading quickly so that we can get the idea. לכך נתהווה חיותם ויקומם בבחינת נפרדים, להיות דבר ויש בפני עצמו, ובעלותם למקורם בשושנו, המתנשא ממות עולם, נעשו גם הם בבחינת התנסות למעלה, מאחר שנכלו ונתאחדו במקורם ממש. So he says, what do you gain from leavened bread? Why is this what people like? Because it has gaiva. Okay? Because it has pride. It has hubris. Right. What is good about hubris? Hubris creates separate beings. Hubris gives identity. Okay? If a young person didn't have gaiva, if a young person did not have any feeling of superiority, of being different, of going to conquer the world, of this or that, the individual would never develop. There would be no sense of identity. That's why young people are searching for identity. Again, from age 16 and on, who am I? I don't know who I am. Why don't I know who I am? Because I have so much pride that I can't accept that I'm just what I see in front of me. Yeah, I have to. The energy of pride in the person is transformed into identity. That's why it's good. The problem is that it causes you to be separate from other people. That it causes you to think more highly of yourself than other people. So if it's used in the wrong way, so the pride becomes something detrimental, becomes something negative. But when we raise it here on Shavuos, we take the leavened loaves of bread and we raise them to their source, so even pride has a real use. What's the real use? That Hashem is Ge'al Kol Ge'im. He's above all those who are prideful, meaning that he's the ultimate source of identity. Hamitnaseh mimot olam. He's above everything else. And so on Shavuos you can find the real meaning of pride. You can find the real meaning of the leavened bread, making it into something positive. And this is also, from this we can understand the difference between the two sheep that are brought daily as a daily sacrifice, and the 2 sheep that are brought for Shavuos. כי שני כבשי העצרת הם שלמים הנחלים לבעלים. מה שאין כן שני כבשי התמידים ליום הם עולות. The same thing is by the sheep. Because the sheep on Shavuos are shlamim. They're peace offerings. So they're eaten by the Kohanim.
And the Baalim.
Baalim are Am Yisrael. So you can't have all them. So the Kohanim eat for everybody. But the 2 sheep that are brought as a daily sacrifice, they're burnt offerings. They're completely consumed by the fire. There's nothing eaten from them. Why? Because they don't rise so high. You don't lift them. You don't wave them. So they're stuck in the world of separation. In the world of separation, pride is bad. And you have to burn it. You have to get rid of it. You have to get rid of the separation. But when you raise it back up to its source, so there even pride, even the feeling that I'm going to be eaten and not consumed by the fire has its place. Everything has a place up there. Again, because the daily sheep offerings, they come down into the world of separation, into our world. So you can't give it to the owners. Because if you gave it to the owners, what would they feel? More separation. It would cause them more trouble. So because of this reason, we burn it completely. But the sheep of Shavuos, which are placed above the 2 leavened loaves, and they're raised up, so they go back to their sources, ksavim, the way they were by Yaakov before he brought them down. They're also connected to these 2 loaves as they're raised up. Therefore, they become a peace offering that can be eaten and consumed even by separate beings down here.
Okay, and tomorrow you can explain to me.
We'll continue tomorrow. We have a beer on this.
Mm-hmm.
We have a beer on this.
Yeah. But the thing that I want to know is, why couldn't I do it at home? Why couldn't I take 2 sheep and put the loaves on them?
You just don't need 2 sheep.
No, why is it only in the Beis Hamikdash? Why was it only the Kohanim?
You can do it now. You don't need the Beis Hamikdash for this. You just can't do it with sheep.
Oh, okay.
But you can still do the same thing.